to get this thing right, and it was a nice follow-up, conclusion, not a conclusion, but a continuation of I think what 2025 needs to be. We get started off right and get the light on the situation. We can do some good things. Each one of us can do some good things. We look forward to what's in store in 2025. Is anybody nervous about 2025? We'll pray for you right now and get you over that. This 2025 is going to be the best year we've ever had, we've ever experienced. It's just going to be good. It's just going to be the goodness of God overwhelming people. As he says, it's going to just run up on you and overtake you, the goodness of God. And it's just going to be... I think we're going to have services on Monday nights where we won't even have a message. It'll just be people sharing the goodness of God that's just overwhelming them, that they just need to get it out so they can make room for more. So be in that kind of mindset this year. It's time not just to learn and to study, but now it's time to experience. It's time to influence. It's time to make a difference in this area as this place is designed to do. Amen. And you guys are the ones that are going to do it. It's not the preacher, the teacher. It's people filled with the Holy Spirit, with the attitude. Anybody ever have? There you go. Anybody ever have been accused of having a little attitude? That's what God wants. He wants some people with a little attitude. If you need some help with attitude, I can bring a little 3-year-old. She can teach you some things about attitude. I just experienced it this afternoon. Anyway, I can get in a rat hole real quick talking about that. But just talking about the new year, as many of us do, we look forward, and many make plans, have goals and resolutions, and they get made just every year. We have a few that most people think of. Of course, we start with what? Eating better. I need to eat better. I need to lose a few pounds. I need to exercise. I need less TV, more reading, less phone, more praying. So many things that we could do less of or more of. So many things that we need to change and probably should change. But those are all good and great. But as I've said, we're going to just... I wish I could describe it in detail, but it's just... Does anybody else have that same feeling? That it's just going to be... different. It's going to be a different year. So anyway, we remember the saying that when it's all said and done, when this thing's over, I don't want to be the one that says, well, I wish I would have. When this thing's all said and done, we want to be that one that say, well, I'm so glad that I did. Right? That's a good attitude I believe we need to develop. Boy, I wish I would have. I wish I would. No, we want to say, oh, I'm so glad that I did. And we want other people to even say that about us. I'm so glad that they did, because they made a difference in my life. So we're encouraged so much in Scripture about that very, very thing to do. This book tells us some things we can do to make a difference. Sure it does. And in Philippians 3, we're going to start tonight. In Philippians 3:13, now the author of this book is old Paul, so I think we can use his advice. Paul is a pretty good instructor. Anybody have any disagreements with Paul? I think we're all okay to use his advice. In Philippians 3, we'll start in verse 13, and he says, "Brethren, I do not count myself to have apprehended." And he basically says that in verse 12 also. He says, boy, I ain't got this whole thing figured out. He says, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forward to those things which are ahead. I'm sure a lot of people use that this week in their message because it's looking forward. He said, okay, that year's behind us. We're in a new year. We're going to go on with this thing. So we forget those things that are behind and we press forward, reaching forward to those things which are ahead. I press toward, in verse 14, he says, I press toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Everybody familiar with this verse? We know Paul was forward thinking, but he also makes the point to say it, and he says it in a way that we need to understand. He doesn't say, okay, now forget those things that happened. No, he says, forgetting Forgetting, okay? Why does he say forgetting? Because we have a enemy that likes to remind us of our past sometimes, and our past sometimes is really not something that we're proud of, that we want to be reminded of, but the enemy makes it a point to keep bringing up that past. So Paul writes it this way, I believe, on purpose. He says forgetting. Why? Because when those things come back to you, forget them again. He does it in Philippians 4 when he says rejoice. And again, I say rejoice. Why? Your rejoicing is going to be challenged. Your forgetting is going to be challenged. Oh, don't you remember last year how you... Yes, I do remember, but get out of here. I've got things to do. Okay? So forget them again. Forget them again. And I told him yesterday out there, he says, I've been blessed in this area to forget. Not as Paul's talking here, but I'm a good forgetter. I'm a talented forgetter. I can forget something just as soon as I'm told. I walk out the door and come back in and say, did you, what? I just told you. Oh, yeah, that's, okay. Okay. Miss Phyllis, you want to come up and speak a little on this? But that's not what he's saying. We know what he's trying to tell us here. So somehow we've got to, well, we can all probably think of some things that we'd really like to forget about. Does anybody have anything you would like to forget and just wish it would have never happened? But maybe some bad decisions, maybe some mistakes or failures. But somehow Paul tells us we just got to forget about those things. Paul even writes forgetting. It's a continuous thing because it's going to take some effort and some continued effort to get that thing done, because we always seem to be reminded either by thoughts or by, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, by others reminding us of the things that we did wrong. Okay, we get reminded of those things, but we're encouraged to keep forgetting what is behind and press on, reach forward, putting our effort into moving forward instead of dwelling in the past. Just simple but powerful advice. Now, if possible, we've got to do our best to deal with those things in the past. We don't just say, well, I'm forgetting that because I can't. No, we got to deal with the things that we need to, take care of them as best as we can, but he makes it a point to say that we forget because we've got things to do. We don't let the past control us. All right, we keep, there's a great philosopher back probably in the early part of this century that he's famous for this saying, keep on keeping on, right? Not really a philosopher if you know who I'm talking about. So if what we did in the past was a mistake or failure, we now know of one more thing not to do. Okay, this one trick, one strategy against the enemy that we can use, and I don't think we as Christians use it as much as we should. When the enemy brings up a failure or a mistake in your life, what if we had the attitude and said, yeah, I'm glad you reminded me of that because that's another thing that I don't want to do. That's another thing that I know doesn't work, right? Who was it, Edison, that invented these light bulbs that we still enjoy today? Does anybody know how many thousands it took him? Wasn't it 2,000 or 3,000 different filaments, glass sizes and gases? And it's in the thousands, they said, but he was of the mindset that, well, his friends might say, well, that one didn't work. He said, no. He said, that's just one more that we know is closer to getting to the one that does. Right? That's just one more that we know we're not going to do anymore. We forget that one and we look ahead. So it's just a strategy. So we know of one more thing not to do. We are one step closer to success. You ever heard the word step? Okay. We as Christians, we as people that come into this thing, that actually live this thing we call Christianity, or however you want to describe. I'm saved. I'm born again. I'm a follower of Jesus. I'm a servant. We know what we're talking about. I go to church. All right. This thing is real to me. We go through steps in this thing. Now, a lot of us see, people like Todd's dad, Pastor Wade, to the development, to the level that he got to, and we say, boy, I want that. I want, or a lot of us knew Pastor Bruce and somebody like that, Joe Dockery, your dad, Pastor Ogden. We know people like that. We think, oh yeah, that's what people need. But we can all think back of of your parents, and even I have mine, that they didn't start out that way. It was what? Steps. So as we think forgetting those things behind, that's just one step that we know now we've got to step away from or step further on, because it's the steps. Okay, we're going to look here in Psalm 37. Another guy writing here, not Paul this time, but David. And I think David and Paul probably had some interesting conversations when they've met, after they've met. They both went through a lot. They both did a lot. They both wrote a lot. And they're both still affecting us a lot today. In verse 23, in Psalm 37, verse 23, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Verse 24, though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. What's David telling us? Much like Paul. Paul says, yeah, there's going to be times when it's hard and you're going to mess up. I don't have this all figured out. What did he say in another place? He said, I do what I don't want to do. I don't do what I want to do. Oh, God, help me. What am I going to do? He said, but bless God. He helps. He upholds me, as David says right here. He upholds me, even though the mistakes are made. He upholds me with his hand. So, David encourages us much like Paul. It's just another step, another step, another step. One step closer to success. Right? We're not going to concentrate on the failures. We forget those and leave them in the past, and we step on. We keep on keeping on. So, could David write? He was a good writer, wasn't he? How encouraging is just this one verse right here. A man like King David encouraging others so powerfully, so beautifully. It just reminds me of how some may talk, though. Talking about steps. Even in church people, we can get to talking and say, it's been a rough one. It seems like every time I take one step forward, then I take, can anybody complete that? 2 steps back. The same way out there yesterday. Everybody knew what I was saying, even before I said it. I didn't have to tell them what I was thinking, because that's kind of the way. I take a step forward, and then here it comes. I got to take 2 steps back. I think they even wrote a song about it. But I'm not talking about us tonight, but a lot of people think that way. Well, it seems like every time we get a little headway, we're just hit back so hard. But even David, what he is, maybe he was even thinking that here, and he wanted people not to think that way, because he knew how to take some pretty good steps, didn't he? He had some opportunities for failure, even at a young age. Says when he was just out watching the sheep as a young boy, what came? Bear. Yeah, he could have made some steps then, couldn't he? Whoop, fast steps, but no, he didn't. He took care of that. Then the lion, and then a big step in his life was when he said, who is that guy messing with the armies of the Lord? What do we got to do to take care of this? That was a different, just a different mentality. David is a neat one to look at, just like Paul. But maybe David, as he was writing this, he just knew how to take these steps because he had lived it. He was, as good Christians say, we might even say he would take steps of faith. David was a man of faith. I didn't look at this yesterday, but in Hebrews, in 11. We're going to look and see. I didn't know if he was in there or not. Can anybody tell me, is David in Hebrews 11? That's the same answer I got. Well, I think he is, but I don't know. Does anybody know without having a look? By faith. Do you? Is he? No. Is David in Hebrews 11? The hall of faith? By faith Abel, by faith Enoch, by faith Noah, by faith Abraham, by faith Sarah. By faith Abraham, Jacob, Esau, Jacob, Joseph, Moses. Y'all can keep looking. I don't see him there, but he is there. Verse 32. I done lost Hebrews. All right, so David knew a little bit about faith. Oh, yeah. 32. And watch someone for the time of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah. Yeah, David, Samuel. Sweet. Who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword. Yes, thank you. Hebrews 11:32. We could call David a mighty man of faith. And we have read how he killed the lion and protected the sheep. He told King Saul that he was going to take care of this giant, this mighty problem that came against the armies of the Most High God. So we could call him a mighty man of faith, but he also knew, he said, all right, guys, when you get to be somebody important like me, you can take these leaps of faith. You can take these bounds of faith, and we can do... No, he said it's steps. The steps of a good man are ordered of the Lord. And I appreciate that, because it's so very interesting that these two are also included in the scripture, because some of his steps were not the right steps, were they? We're even told of some of the pretty bad steps that he took. He said, oh, who's that? Okay, we know the story, how it goes from there. So those steps are part of the deal. So it's very interesting that they included them in this scripture, even a mighty man included in the hall of faith, but we're still told of that type of step in his life. So we could also, we just look at it, it's embarrassing, it's humiliating, it was not what he was all about. It was just a bad mistake. And we all remember all the more the great things that he did, but somehow he was able to go on from there. And I think Paul describes it even for David. He forgot those things. They were still part of his life. They were, weren't they? Had a baby, thank goodness that it wasn't the end of David. If that would have been the end of him, that mistake, getting that girl pregnant, and we wouldn't have had Solomon. One of the greatest ever. One of the greatest illustrations of God's goodness. Solomon. Wow. So, forget those things that are behind, but we remember the great things that David did, and we also have to keep forgetting the mistakes. A lot of people just want to say, we see the great things that he did. He learned from those failures. He moved on, and we often refer to the parable of the sower. And once again, I think it applies so good to what we're talking about tonight, talking about steps, moving forward, forgetting the past, a new year, goals. Just to put you on the spot, Mr. Charlie, you said something about goals. You were kind of having a shift from goals, and instead of goals, and I forgot.
Into imagery.
Imagery. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Instead of a goal, he was more into imagining what is desired. Okay, so, all right, so I think the parable of the sower, and we're going to get into it for just a little bit, I think it applies so wonderfully to what we're talking about. We're talking about steps, moving forward, forgetting the past, a new year, goals, imagery, dreams, vision. Okay? However you're looking at this thing, we're calling 2025. Okay? Parable of the sower. We're going to go fast. As part of what we do, of doing this whole thing that we call life with each other, I really, really, really want to encourage us with this message tonight to be a part of the group that can say, I'm glad that I did. Are you with me? You know what I mean when I'm saying that, right? You know, when we get to that point, I'm glad. I'm so glad that I did. I didn't just sit in the pew, but I'm so glad that I did. Okay, you with me? We want to be that group. There's going to be some things I'm sure that's, oh, I wish, but no, we want to say, I'm so glad that I did. We walked by faith. We talked about that we always talk about that. We walked by faith. Faith comes by hearing. Hearing by the word. The word is the seed. So we've made some mistakes, and others may know us only by our failures. There's some of us in here that have really done good with the failure part of life. Just to put it simply. I'm looking around because thank God that Paul writes, anointed, influenced by the Holy Spirit. He writes the heart of God to people that I just described, that were very good at the failure part of this life. We failed in spades. We were thank God that we can forget that, because others, that may be all they know about us. That's how they leave us. There's a football. Just heard it today. Has anybody ever listened to Sports Talk, Pat Jones? If you listen to him much at all, Tyreek Hill was brought up. Now, Tyreek Hill, he really is fast. He's a good player, but he's done some things. And Pat Jones he just turns my stomach. He said, as far as I'm concerned, he no longer exists as a human. That's the world's way. Now, of course, we don't approve and we don't appreciate anything that he's done, that he's been accused of. And if he's guilty of it, it is terrible what he's done. But we see the world system right there, because golly, if it was based on mistakes and having to pay for your mistakes, man, I'm a goner. I'm done. I had no chance. But thank God this deal is different. Okay, we may have made some mistakes and others have seen them, but we know, and we're learning how to forget those and keep, even if it's the enemy or even if it's other people, we got to keep moving forward. The parable begins with a farmer who goes out to sow. It's simple, isn't it? He goes out to sow. And some seed falls by the wayside. Some falls on shallow soil. Some falls on ground with thorns and thistles come. Some falls on the good ground and produces. We could say there's a few mistakes being made here in this story. Now, I'm not going to get sacrilegious, or I'm not going to, okay, but just stay with me, all right? This sower seems to need some help with his farming skills. Why? Because the first type of ground, it says he just throws them by the wayside. So who, as a good farmer, would do that? Evidently not a good one, right? Because if he's wanting a crop, that's no way to get it. So we see a mistake already here. Next, we see another mistake. If the sower would have just taken the time to study the ground he was using, he would have noticed that people were walking through this spot. Okay, now he knew that one didn't work, but he's thinking, okay, this next spot looks a little better. So even though the people are walking through there, that's the pathway, and the soil's been trampled down, all the good's been stomped out of it, he still puts seed there. Okay, now we know it's probably just because he was brought. But for tonight, this is the way we're going to look at it. Who would do that? It was a mistake. Okay? So, if he would have just paid attention, all those people walking through there, well, I think I'll plant something there, because I remember my wife had a flower bed, and when the animals got in there and walked all and trampled all that, she was so happy that her plants were destroyed. No, that's not the way it works. My plants are not going to succeed there, but I'm going to try it anyway. No, it was a mistake. So we see now, he says, okay, that one didn't work, that one didn't work. Okay, we're getting out here kind of in the middle is what I see. Not on the edges anymore. We're out into the middle here. This looks pretty good. This looks pretty good. Tell you, here, I think we'll just try this. even though those didn't work, forgetting those things that are behind, he sows into this ground. And lo and behold, what happens? Coming up with the plants also came what we would call undesirables. What? Jesus describes as thorns and thistles. And it's a bad deal, okay? Back in our day, what did we have? We had them little, I don't know what they were called, but they were little plant. They looked like a plant, but they weren't. They were a weed, and we had to go out there and pull them up. Every day after school, Dad said, get a hoe, get out there and get that garden weeded. We had a garden that I swear was 40 acres, but when you're out there now, it's only like 100. But anyway, so here comes the thorns, the thistles, the weeds, the undesirables. Bermuda grass. Remember Miss Sandy's garden back here? You guys that were here. Chuck Woodall right over here. He had a garden looked like being a magazine. I mean, the rows were just, he stringlined his rows. It was manicured, it was tilled, it was weeded. Plants were spaced. I mean, he measured, and Sandy had Bermuda grass this deep. She would go through the grass to find fruit. Chuck said, man, her garden makes so much more than mine does. So anyway, that's not really the way it should be done, but all these things like Bermuda grass, weeds, and everything were coming in. And the guy was like, what's going on? Even in the next parable, Jesus talks about what was going on, but I didn't plant those. And he just sits there and says, well, I guess we'll see what happens. And what happens? The weeds and everything take away from his plants. They take the nutrients, the moisture out of the soil, and the plants end up failing. Right? And what's Jesus call it? Well, that's the cares of the world. That's the deceitfulness of riches. And one guy said, well, that's no money or too much money. So we finally get to the point where he says, okay, last time we did this, we put those plants in there, and those other things came in there and just ruined our crop. So here's what we're going to do this time. When those things come up, we're going to pull them out. We're going to watch and pay attention and weed, and we're going to take care. We're going to cultivate. We're going to do this thing right. And lo and behold, what happened? It produced a crop. And it says in the fullness of time, it produced 160, 30-fold. Anybody have the revelation or understand what he means by 160 or 30-fold? It could mean, I don't know, but it could mean 100%. If you plant one, you're going to get what? 2. It could mean 100 times. If you plant one, you're going to get 100. I don't know. It's not described, and I've researched it a little bit. But if anybody gets into that and figures it out, please let me know. I think it's maybe an application that's going to be personal. So anyway, applying to this morning as we begin a new year, I think we see that the ground called the wayside as a failure, a mistake, but we don't stop there. We don't stop there. Yeah, that didn't work at all. Some people just give it up. But I think we take the next step. And even though we make another mistake, what do? We take that next step. And hey, we got a little chance here. We see some things good happening, but lo and behold, another mistake, failure. But if you hang in there and you take that final step, you step into that 160, 30-fold. Right? Forgetting those things. Why? We want the 160, 30. And even more important, we'll get to in just a second. We don't stop there. We just don't say, well, this farming thing, it's not for me. But we've got to figure this thing out because God said you got to figure this out. So this is just, all we're doing is feeding the birds. Now we take that step. This ground seems to be better, but it's not. It's too shallow. I thought you were going to check this ground. Why didn't you check this ground? More mistakes, maybe not our own, but still a failure. So we don't stop there. One more step forward. The ground's been checked. It has good depth. We have the opportunity here to produce a good crop. But what are those other things that we see coming in? We didn't plant those. What's going on? Who put them there? Why doesn't somebody else take care of that? Oh, too late. Another mistake, another failure. But we don't stop there. It's too hard. We're never going to make this thing work. It only works for those other people. I've seen people make this thing work, but I don't understand how they do it. But we don't stop there. We take that one more step. Somebody check the ground. The ground is good, good depth, excellent location. How are the plants doing? So well. Are there any undesirables? Yes, there was. But we took care of them. We did our part. So what's going on? What's going on? All the bad is out, and now what? 160, 30. We forget all that. That was behind why. That was just a step to get to what we wanted. Because it's the steps of a good man that get us to the 160. The steps of a normal man is what? I want somebody else to take the steps. They can take the steps better than me. I'll pay them to take the steps. So, I still have not figured out the way they figured that fold stuff. But as I said, if you do, I'm going to assume it like this, just for me. I think it's, there's levels of production. I think there can be a level of production that takes care of just my needs, maybe my family's needs. There's another level that can take care of even my extended family's needs. There's another level of production that can take care of a community's needs. So I don't know if it's just levels of production. It's just in there. It's not just in there. It's there for a reason. Just like the 152 fish that they caught. Why did he say that? That bugs me when he does stuff like that. Why didn't he just say they caught a bunch of fish? There's a reason he put that number in there. So anyway, either way, 160 or 30, we got to remember, what is it? It's increase. It's increase. It's production. What did he tell us in the very beginning? Be fruitful. Be productive. Multiply. Right? So we think, all right, we just planted a little bit of corn, and now look at this. We got a whole bunch of corn. Right? That's the goal. Right? Yeah, for some. But I think for us, forgetting that past stuff, we want to step into this 160-30. Is that really the goal? What is the goal? What's the goal? Anybody tell me the goal? My goal, like one said, some people's goal, if you plant corn, is popcorn. Some is corn on the cob. Some is, just creamed corn. Some, okay, that's fine. I think that's the blessing. That's the result. But wow, what's the goal? I think the goal is to learn to get to the good ground. The process, the system. He said, as long as this thing remains, as long as my boys and girls are on this planet, this process is how everything works. Seed time, harvest. Everything. Okay? That process, right? Steps of a good man. Forgetting those steps, those failures, pressing on toward the goal, toward the prize. What's the prize? Operating in this good ground where all things are possible. Why? We put a good seed in good ground, it cannot fail. Now, if we let weeds and things, circumstances take over, yeah, it can fail. The seed cannot fail. To me, that is so much why he said, just have faith as a seed. Why does he say stuff like that? I think he told me, he said, you got to have faith as a seed, because what if that seed could talk? What would he say? Now you hold me in your hand having this seed, it's just a little old thing. I'm just a little bitty thing. They're going to make lessons about me because I'm so small. They're going to think because I'm so small, and he said, because I'm so small, it just takes a little amount to move a big old mountain. Is that what that seed might say? Sure. I've done it. We do it. It's a small seed. Well, what if that seed would say, but man, if you would put me in that ground over there, you would see what I could do. What if you had faith as a seed and you allowed yourself to be put in a position where we could see what you could do in 2025? Yeah, but I tried that. Man, I messed up so bad, it was embarrassing. It was humiliating. Well, take the next step. Forget those things that are behind. You with me? See how simple this, but yet powerful? Just have faith like a seed. What's that? Well, I'll tell you what, just in this is a seed still talking, just in your hand or just in a package or just in the closet, just in the cupboard, just in the garden shed, man, I'm just a seed. He said, but there's something happens when I'm used as I'm supposed to be used. When I come in contact with dirt, there's something that happens to a seed. Can anybody tell me, just in one phrase? Okay. Anybody? Life? Okay. Let's call it even something more profound. How about the miracle of life? Okay, now just sitting there, what is it? Yeah, it's just a seed. Bird come, gone, right? Poop. All it is. But put in the ground, just that little tiny seed. What does he say? It becomes one of the biggest plants in the garden. Even the birds come and rest in its branches. The miracle that happens when that seed is put in the environment it needs to become what it's designed to. So, if we want mustard, we plant a mustard seed. What happens? The miracle of life. We get mustard. It's the way this whole thing works. So, every time, it's the process. I think every time it's the process. Good seed, good ground, good care, good time, good result, good crop. Now we know there's challenges. We know there's hard times. Wind, fire, animals, drought, flood. What's a simple word for all that? Life. Life happens. Every time our crop, we have that expectation of production, of multiple. Sometimes what happens? Ooh, life happens. Right? We get slammed by a sorry old mare. He had plans to go do good with that horse. Boy, things happen, but what happened? Okay? So, life happens, but we know the system. So what do we do? Well, I tried it. My crop was wiped out. No, now we know the process. Good ground, good seed, miracle of life. So we know the system, we know the process, we know what to do. We've figured it out, how it works every time. Good seed, good ground, good care, good result, 160, 30-fold. I tend to think, and I've already talked about that. Every time, and for the first service here on a Monday night, I sure hope that I can encourage it that there's not anybody thinking, I wish I would have stayed home. I hope that's not you tonight. I'm hoping everybody can say, I'm so glad that I came tonight, because for this new year, I want to so much less be thinking of, I wish I would, but so much more, I want us to be thinking, I'm so glad that I did. I didn't just hear about this thing, but I actually did something with it. I did something with it. And I know you guys are the ones that will do something with it, because as I've tried to explain, the miracle of life that we see as that seed hits the dirt, I think, to me, that's the point Jesus was making when he said, if you just had faith as a seed, you could move mountains. Now, I'm sure we could say he was talking spiritually. But was he? What was the man's name that invented Caterpillar? He could move mountains. How? He had a seed. What did he have? He had an idea. If I put tracks on that thing instead of tires, it's going to get a lot more grip. And we're going to be able to push a lot more. And that's important. As one guy said, now God put a lot of this place, a lot of this dirt, a lot of this stuff around here, God sure put it in the wrong place. We got to be able to move it around. But that's the way it works, isn't it? He had an idea. And to me, that's what makes the difference. Those ideas. But one guy was real encouraging as he shared something similar to this. He said, you know, one of the most, in this process, one of the most easy or most predictable circumstances that follows an idea is disruption. Right? There's challenge. Well, what did we see in the parable? Threw it by the wayside. Yeah, challenged birds came and took it. Why? Well, he says, well, didn't understand it. He made a mistake. Second one, the same way. Just really didn't do things right. Made a mistake. Still failure. But that last one, we get to that point. And, but disruption. But if we're able to get through those steps, forgetting those disruptions, what happens? Production. One guy said fruition. We see things come to fruition. What's that? Fruit in action. The seed no longer is the seed. What does it become? The plant that makes the fruit, that makes the seeds, which become what? The plants that make the fruit, that make the seeds. The process now is going. All right? Everything. I think he's saying everything, boys and girls. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe can be achieved. Good or bad. One of the, well, we would say probably the first example of disruption that we read about. What was it? One of the first examples of after temptation. That's good. Even earlier than that. A disruption. Satan. He was involved, yeah. Yeah. In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. What an idea. What followed this great idea? It was without form and void. Disruption. Even God's plan. But I think that's our example. God, the Creator, shows us how to create. Now, we can't call something out of nothing as He did. Oh, but He blessed us. He said, I've given you, in the beginning, He said, I've given you everything to freely enjoy. go be fruitful, multiply. What does that mean? Just go eat everything? I think it meant just go do whatever comes to your mind. You can do it. And they did it. Until they couldn't do it anymore. And then God said, this is not good. I've got to remove the... And this is where it gets tickly to me. Is that when he said, I've got to put them out. I've got to separate them now. Did they have the ability now to only think bad? It does say that. Boy, that bugs me. He says their mind was continually on evil. So I got to get rid of them. Boy, that's disruption. But then through the prophet Isaiah, he said, a woman shall conceive and have a son. And he said, unto us, child is born, a son is given. What did he do? One more step. Next step, he's got to be born. He's got to be baptized. He's got to go through all that he goes through. He gets to the next step. What is that? Death. What does he do? He dies. Next step, buried. Next step, goes down. Next step, raised. Live. Next step, Hebrews 9, with his own blood, gets us back into the process. He says, okay, now you again are hooked back up to the process. Before you had no connection. I came back. I am, he says, I am everything that you need to be connected to. But I'm doing all this to bring back the connection so you can once again be connected to, because I am you. Wow. All right. So, how do we wrap this up? Any questions or comments? Let's just do it that way. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Very good. That's one to look at. Let it be unto you according to your faith. So, yeah. So ideas are coming constantly. Thoughts, plans, vision, dream, image, however you describe it and think about it. But just remember, it's the way it's always going to be. We've got to choose which ones. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 10, he says, we cast down arguments and everything that exalts itself against the knowledge of Christ. Get your minds right. Get the thinking right. Taking every thought, what? Captive. To me, that's having that seed right there. I get to choose what I do with that seed. And to me, that's the blessing of this thing. He doesn't say, all right, this is the way it's got to be if you want. No, he says this deal is freedom. It's liberty. You choose. You choose. Now, he does go ahead and say, choose life. Please, choose life. Choose blessing. But no, he says, this deal's, he says, I love you too much to make you do what you have to do. He says, I love you so much, I want you to do it because you've tasted and seen that I'm good. And because of what we can do. This just came to me. Because of what we can do after that revelation. Oh, I've tasted and seen that the Lord is good. And my ideas are in action and producing things that other people taste and see that the Lord, oh, He is so good. It can affect so many people. Just through one seed. Just through one seed. Any other comments? What about, I've thought about this. It's pretty easy to illustrate this or to compare this with money, you know, thinking, well, I need to do something. I need to invest or I need to learn a business, you know, or that's pretty, but boy, we get into some touchy, to some really, to some things that affect us all and affect people personally, but we get into health and into I would say standards of living. We get into personal issues. How is this presented to others in a way where it's not condemning or it doesn't bring a guilt or a shame? Jesus could do it. How do we do it? I know I had a relative that went through some treatments, and some of my other family went to him, and after that we talked, and he made it through the treatments and everything went okay, but he said it seemed as though as they were coming to me, even trying to pray and to encourage, he says it felt like that I wasn't doing my part, is the way they made him feel. He said, I felt like I was wrong to be sick, is the way sometimes that we come across. You should be. But how do we get this process into that person? Yeah. Because even the body, I think, is such a tremendous, gosh, what an invention, what a creation. If Mike and Dennis both have had incredible things go on with their bodies medically. And I won't share any of them, that's personal, but incredible what these things can do. And we think about